Hello and welcome to the 101st episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, the episode in which we dive further into our top 50 games of all time, covering games 40 through 31. I always find it weird. I know it makes perfect sense that it's like 40 to 31.
Yeah, it just feels a little bit unnatural. But
that's how math works.
Maths is funny like that.
Would you say math or maths, Kellen?
Okay, here's the thing.
Let the listeners bet at home. Will Kellen say he prefers math or maths?
Neilan has converted me.
Oh,
wait, what?
Because it's cute. Okay, like when Neilan does something dumb and you're like, oh, cute Neilan, I'm like, okay, fine.
Right.
Wait, I like how the English language has been Neilan doing something dumb.
Maths?
Correct maths.
That's
The language
not correct
we invented?
English. Wait a minute.
How many maths are there in a mathematics?
Oh, you're just not using like internet speak? You think it's
No.
actually like a return to ye olde England? Well,
That's how you say
that. I take it back.
outside of America.
I'm off. I'm out. Nope. I take everything I said back.
I love
Wait, it actually
math.
is. You think it's math?
Yeah, no.
And you're saying it to try to get us to return to ye olde English.
No, I'm saying it because that's what I grew up saying. Because everyone outside of America says maths. No one says math.
You didn't
except
grow up
America.
in England either.
Listen to words I'm saying. No one outside of America, the greater world, including other countries that are not just England, all say maths.
I heard greater world, and then you excluded.
And you found it hard to imagine
yeah.
a world outside
I actually
America?
just didn't listen to anything after that because
He just
that
had
goes
thoughts
against
of apple pie and
that goes against all of my programming. So
that's funny.
I actually didn't know that. It's very interesting.
There may well be other couple of other countries, but yeah, no, it's almost always maths.
The things like where the countries that use like the imperial system.
Yeah.
It's like America and like Vanuatu.
Yeah,
right.
there's like one other country in the world that uses imperial.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple reason is because mathematics is plural, so it's a plural word. And for some reason that I don't understand, you guys just dropped the S.
Who's the you guys there? Because I seem to
You
recall.
specifically, I hold responsible.
Enough with the linguistics talk. Let's get into the games. But before we do, let's point you guys in the direction of our Discord, boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, where we've had a lively chat about the previous 10 games. We've been discussing games 50 through 41. See? Even though we haven't, I'm going to say we have. That's like broadcasting. So you can debate the games on our last episode. You can debate the games on this episode. You can tell us your favorite games at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. There's always lively board game and otherwise chat going on. It's been a really fun, vibrant community that I've enjoyed being a part of. You can also, if you want a more formal, maybe in some ways deeper discussion, boardgamebarrage.com/guild, I think is a nice way to have like more in-depth conversations where you can sit back and write responses in a forum sort of atmosphere. And that's been a fun way to interact with fans as well. So let us know what you think about this episode or about your favorite games in either of those venues. But on to the games. And I'm going to start us off with number 40 by The Doctor. This is his first appearance on my list, I think, but he'll be making more. And this game did drop 13 spots from last year, but I just played it and I continue to love it. This is Blue Lagoon. Blue Lagoon is as he's been wont to do recently, is sort of a re-implementation of an earlier game that he did. In this case, it is Through the Desert. So this is in the spirit of Go. You are placing tiles around the board, trying to gain resources, also trying to create routes that touch a number of different villages. It's a very abstract and very cutthroat game. This game, more than many, relies on your ability to understand the tempo and to make changes in tempo if possible, because if there's a part of the island that you need to hit or there is a resource that you need to get, you need to always be cognizant of how far other people are away from those spots. So you always want to be placing tiles in ways to get the most resources or to hit the most spots to be as efficient as possible. But there certainly are times where you see Kellen make a step towards that bamboo that you need, and you know that if I don't act right now, Kellen can swipe it out from under me. So I just love that about Blue Lagoon. It's such a tempo, such a quick game. I taught this to a couple people last weekend and they really enjoyed it, and I just love it.
I think this is such a great entry point into Nizia type games.
Yeah.
The Only True and Living Doctor makes amazing games, but this one allows for a multiplicity of ways to score unlike a harsher game like Through the Desert
Yeah.
is. I think he's had a great idea the last few years, which is taking some of his older ideas and re-releasing them in just a smidgen friendlier package. It's still tense. It's
Absolutely.
still cutthroat.
Yep.
And you're still kind of going, oh no, please, Mark, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. And you're in these little mini competitions everywhere on the board.
Could not agree more. Absolutely right.
But it's still pleasant enough at the end that your score is like decently close to everyone, so you didn't just get like got.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was my favorite game of 2018. It is, if you are past the entry-level game, this is a game I would recommend to most people. It is a game I was quite keen to give as gifts to people in 2018 to some of my board gaming friends. It is a very cool game that will be on my list as well.
That is Blue Lagoon.
My number 40 game, best game of all time. Mark has already mentioned this before in the previous episode. It moved up a spot despite a couple of other games coming in above it. So, it's held strong despite that. Mostly buoyed by our play of it at Chuck's. This is Panic on Wall Street.
Yes.
A fantastically fun game. Mark already spoke about it in the last episode. I love the way that the game sort of is basically two simultaneous games, bankers and investors. You're just shouting over each other, trying to make deals. It's just fun. It's silly. There's a lot of lol random dice rolling in it that determines how the investors benefit. It's all in the spirit of a very fun, very entertaining game that was one of the highlights of my shucks.
You guys can't stick to the format. Why are you here?
We are sticking to the format.
Double crossover.
Double crossover.
crossover. The double crossover.
Thank you.
That is Panic on Wall Street, my number 40th best game of all time.
My 40th favorite game of all time is new to this list. If you asked me last year if it would make the list, I would have said yes. I just have not played it yet. This got a re-release this year, so it is timely. This is Dune. Dune is a game designed by the designers of Cosmic Encounter, one of my favorite games of all time, where you are playing various factions in the Dune universe. Everyone has an ability that completely changes the game. You are bidding money for cards, except one player gets all the money that everyone bids for cards. You're paying money to travel on the map, except one player gets all the money that you pay to move your units around on the map. One player, the Bene Gesserit, are literally trying to predict a winner for the game and a turn on which they win, which if that happens, they actually win the game instead. So there's paranoia. And one player controls a lot of the information. You're blind bidding on those cards, but one player gets to know what they are before you bid on them and is allowed to take notes while everyone else doesn't know what the hell is going on. Dune is an experience in a box. It's not going to be for everyone. It is long. It does have some old edges to it. I would never get rid of this game. The caveat is some of my love for this game comes from my love of the Dune universe. I do believe that if there was no Dune theme, I would still own and have this game, but it would not be in the 40th position.
Did you have Rex, or did you ever play Rex?
I have never played Rex, but I'd love to.
Yeah.
But I'm biased against the Twilight Imperium theme, so that would even hurt it a little bit more.
Yeah. My number 39 game is new to the list, but it's one of this designer's older designs. I have not played Vladimir Suchi's latest Underwater Cities, which I've heard really good things about, but this game is Shipyard. Shipyard is one of his, again, older games. It's very, I've got to admit, very dry looking, although it's about ships, so it's wet in that case. But it's very dry, very Euro looking. But boy, if you like rondelles, this is a game for you. Mac Gertz, step aside, because Shipyard is rondelles on rondelles on rondelles. Not a game that jumped out to me because of its dryness and of its bland presentation, and because it just had so many rondelles. But it's such a well-designed game. There's so many different paths to victory. You're forced to play tactically as well as strategically in this game as you're building ships and testing them out. You've got to build ships to specifications that are required in the moment, but also for long-term secret objectives. It's just really, really well built. You've got a nice engine building component that feels very satisfying. By the end, you're building and releasing these ships at a much faster rate than you were earlier in the game. It's a game that rewards short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning. It feels to me like somewhat of a diamond in the rough. Everybody knows Suchi at this point because of his games Last Will and Pulsar and Underwater Cities, but I've played two of his older games recently, this one, Shipyard, and 20th Century, which is another super bland-looking game, but God, it's also super good. So yeah, I'd recommend anybody who likes the newer Suchis to definitely go back and try Shipyard.
Would Kellen Allen like Shipyard?
Callan Allen would not like Shipyard.
Great.
This has been getting a lot of love.
I wasn't listening to you.
That's good.
This has been getting a lot of love in like our local scene, and I haven't tried it yet, so I'm psyched to give this a go. Everyone seems to be raving about it.
I think you would definitely like it.
Okay,
I think you
cool.
Like it, yeah. That is Shipyard at 39.
My number 39 game is another game that Mark has already mentioned.
Look at that. Great minds think alike.
So this is a double
crossover.
It is Kemet.
Which is Kemet backwards, for those who are wondering.
Yep.
Think
Wait,
of it.
what?
Kemet, okay? Kemet.
Yes, I got
is
that.
Kemet backwards.
Okay. And that means?
That means that's how you say it backwards.
Wait, does it mean anything?
It's like mirror talk. You
You're
ever
just-
mirror right?
What
I'm
is
giving
this?
facts.
This is high-level
I'm
mind
trying-
play? What's happening
I'm
here?
trying to educate the listeners.
I want this for every single game on the list.
I'll do
The
it.
backwards.
I'll do it.
Backwards meaning. Kemet is a dudes on the map game. It is a smart sort of mix of being slightly more abstracted, slightly more Euro. The map is engineered in a way so that everyone is equidistant. It's very clever. It's a game that encourages attacking, still has cool powers, still lets you put big monster minis onto the board. Kemet is a game I want to play more of. It's held up despite the onslaught of recent dudes in the map games.
Yep, agreed.
That is Kemet at number 39.
Or
Temek backwards.
My number 39 best game of all time is Elos Rof. Or spelled forward. That is For Sale.
I love it.
For Sale is a fantastic filler game. For Sale is the game that I fight Mark with over whether it is in superior or inferior to the B game that must not be named. It is superior. For Sale is a game that takes place in two parts. In the first part, you are acquiring properties, and then in the second half of the game, you are using those properties to bid on checks. And it's this great tension because you can amass a good set of properties in the beginning and then totally misplay them in the second half. And so you think that you've set yourself up great for the second half of the game, and then you just misplay completely in the second half of the game. What makes the second half of the game interesting is that it could be an auction for 4 checks, and the only difference between them is one of the checks is worth 1,000 less than the other checks, and you saved your best building for that auction, and it actually doesn't matter what you play, and then suddenly you've blown your ammo on the wrong auction. For Sale is fantastic, will always be a part of my collection, and one that I'd highly recommend if people were looking for a cheap, good game.
Yeah, I really like For Sale. I even like the thematic part of it where like the cheapest building is a dog house or like a cardboard box, and then you get to like the highest one, which I think is number 30, is like a space ship or something.
It's 30 things that Mark will never have.
Isn't there a gym? There might be a gym there somewhere. Like
A
maybe
home. Not a house, Mark. A home.
My number 38 game is new to the list and also new to board gaming. This is a 2019 release, Pipeline. Pipeline is a heavy economic game that also adds some resource management and some tiling in a sort of unique way. Although I've spoken about my misgivings a little bit with the tiling aspect because it does seem like a little bit like busy work, but it's done in an interesting way. This game strikes me as sort of maybe like Lacerda done as well as it can be, where it's like a heavy economic game with a lot of intermingling parts, but the way they're connected feels very smooth and very even intuitive and just interesting to me. It's a game that I was looking forward to playing, and when we got it to the table, I was very pleasantly surprised. If you're looking for a heavy economic game, if you like the Lacerda vein of heavy games with a lot of interlocking parts, I think Pipeline will be a very pleasant surprise. So my number 38 game, Pipeline.
My number 38 game of all time is a new entry from the list. It's not a new game for 2019. I think this was hovering just off my list last year and then buoyed by a couple of games last year where it really excelled. The Estates. This is a really, really good game. It's a really tight, mean game where the entirety of the game is just a series of auctions and strategic placements. You are building up these properties and then buying companies. You want the properties of your color to be above a certain height or value in order to get points. But only 2 of the 3 rows where you can place your buildings will score positively at the end of the game, and the other one will score negatively. So all your best efforts might sort of come to haunt you at the end of the game based on how the other two rows end up doing. It's a really, really good game. It's relatively simple in its structure, but has so much nuance in the strategy. You can play a winning game by scoring 0, by not having any of the companies. And I've seen Mark do this successfully, and it was infuriating. That is The Estates. It's a game I want to play a lot more of.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at The Estates. I think this is a thing I say a lot, but the sign of a good game for me is a game I want to keep playing despite doing terribly.
Actually, you know, it's funny you bring that up because my number 40 game, Blue Lagoon, which I mentioned, I've played maybe like 8 or 9 times now, and I've never won it. Even teaching it to 2 completely new players, they also beat me. So yeah, I totally agree.
The Estates is another game that I love in abstract, but cooled on some of my more recent plays of it. I still enjoy it. I still think it's great. I love how simple it is. I love how bright and colorful the new edition is. But I don't know that I enjoy playing it. I don't know why.
That is number 38, The Estates.
My number 38 best game of all time is Crokinole. Crokinole is the quintessential dexterity game. It almost feels unfair to compare Crokinole to other dexterity games in the hobby. Crokinole can be quite expensive. It's a giant wooden board. It's more of a sport or competition a la shuffleboard or darts. And if one of you idiots has darts on your top 50 board games of all time list, I will leave the podcast.
51 for me, just missed out.
But in Crokinole, you are flicking a disc, trying to get it into the center of a circle. But the cool, fun bit is that if there are any pieces on the board that aren't your pieces, you must hit those pieces before you can go toward the hole in the center. And so that makes it a game where each round you may be trying to make shots that you otherwise wouldn't have to make. It's not just shooting free throws right in the center. It's, oh my God, Mark has a piece right there in the corner, and now I have to figure out how to hit that. Tournament rules also have the one cheek rule, which is
I knew you were going to bring this up. I was just
my favorite rule in any board
I
game, which is that you can't move your chair around and you must have one cheek on the chair at all times, which is something I enforce religiously when I play Crokinole with people. Christina likes to violate this rule. Crokinole, Mark, you played it for the first time.
I really, really loved it. I love it. Yeah.
But it's like hard to classify it as a board game.
Yeah, it's in that weird space. But yeah, I think it definitely qualifies.
Crokinole, my number 38.
Kellen, you ready? My number 37, Bruges. We have a
double crossover. This is new to my list, but it really shouldn't be because I really enjoy it. Kellen's already spoken about it, but I'll just touch base on things I enjoy as well. Multi-use cards. Every time you draw cards in this game, you feel like you're opening up a bunch of new possibilities. Every card feels different than the other ones, and there's just so many powers that you have a chance to utilize. One unfortunate part is I've only ever played this game with the River Zwin expansion, which I hear helps it quite a bit. So, and I know it's very much out of print, so that's sort of rough. But I guess you would vouch for it without the expansion. Absolutely. I think it is made a little bit better. It
makes the canal building a little stronger. Yeah. But yeah, I love it. I think it's really well done. Again, the multi-use cards is where it's at when it comes to Bruges.
Neilan, have you played Bruges?
I have. It just didn't leave a strong first impression, I should say. I wouldn't say no to a game of it. I didn't feel like excited by it.
But screaming, I'm so clever, playing a roll and write by yourself did leave an impression.
Alley, exactly.
That left an impression.
So my number 37 game is Bruges.
My number 37 best game of all time is another game that has fallen quite a few places, like Grand Austria Hotel I mentioned last episode. It is a Euro game that is, again, aesthetically not in the top tier of games anymore. I think, again, 2019, we expect a little bit more of the way our games look. Alhambra is a game that I sort of came to quite early in the hobby and still enjoy a lot. I think if you were to ask me to play a game of Alhambra, I would never say no. But I feel like my tastes have sort of moved past in a way that I would never be excited to play it anymore. It has just such a strong nostalgia legacy place on my list because of how much I loved it very early on. It's a game that, although was super important when I started the hobby, it's just not giving me the same joie de vivre as it once did. So it's just dropping down.
Put it in a trash can. Not on your list in the 30s as a best game of all time, Neilan. I heard you say it.
It's still good.
It's still good.
It doesn't give you that effervescence for life.
I think something about the purity of the system and tile-laying games being something I like a lot still makes Alhambra one of the top 50 games of all time at number 37.
I'm a big fan of Alhambra. I really, really enjoy it.
I don't know how anyone can look at this game and decide to play it.
Just because of the blandness. Have you played it?
Yeah.
Have you played it like vanilla?
I think I played it with one expansion.
Okay.
But when someone comes to me and says, like, yeah, you just need one of these 9 expansions to make it good,
Right.
I'd say just eat something that's good on its own.
Right. Well, actually, I'm in that camp. I prefer vanilla Alhambra.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. I like it just plain.
Yeah, I would actually say, like, I don't think Vanilla Alhambra is bad at all. Like, I think it's quite good.
It's my ideal game of it is vanilla.
Yeah, I actually think this is pretty close to like the complete opposite for me. I can't think of a game that's more boring than Alhambra. There are a couple, to be honest.
It's a buying. I love the buying.
So it's got such a nice.
You have to buy with a certain currency. You don't get change.
Yeah.
If you get exactly the number, you get to get another card. I think
such a novel
system.
You've sold me. That description was so evocative.
There you go.
My number 37 best game of all time is a game that does leave an impression, unlike Alhambra. This is Lords of Vegas. Lords of Vegas is a modern classic at this point, a game of acquiring different casinos and trying to take over other people's casinos. And when you connect 2 casinos together, there's sort of this roll-off for who's going to get to control the casino. There is a lot of LOL, WTF randomness in this game. You must be okay with that before you commit to it. But it's a game about a casino, and you're building casinos. And then, when you inevitably get behind, you go to other players' casinos and you bet your money. The game is more than the sum of its mechanisms for me. Lords of Vegas is one that you can play with non-gamers who want something a little bit longer. It is a little bit longer. It has some elements of Acquire in it that I think are great. It has some elements of Chinatown that are great. It has that negotiating feeling to it. I've replaced the paper money in mine with poker chips, which I think makes it even more delightful. Neilan, have you had a chance to play this, or you did and just don't like it?
No, I've played it a couple of times. It just didn't really speak to me. I couldn't tell you why.
But at least it's not as ugly as Alhambra. Mark, have you played this?
I've not played it.
I think you definitely would like it.
I feel like I would.
It's like, Mark, it's like, should I like Pipeline or should I like Lords of Vegas? And like your brain would say, I should like Pipeline more than Lords of Vegas.
Okay.
But you'd be wrong.
But you'd be wrong.
I see. Okay.
Well, no, I want to play Pipeline. Like, you wouldn't be predisposed to loving it, I don't think.
Lords of Vegas?
Yeah.
I own Lords of Vegas. I don't own Pipeline. What's that tell you? Well, probably nothing because I'll get whatever game. So, yeah.
I don't know, Mark. Why are you asking me these questions right now?
Speaking of Vegas, I think people will sort of universally agree that Vegas knew that it had made it when it was able to, like, in the casinos, have the ability to, in the hot Vegas sun, house a menagerie of beasts like penguins.
What?
What if they were zany penguins? My number 36 game is Zany Penguins. Zany Penguins is a game I like a lot. In my head, and I haven't really thought about this enough, it's sort of in my top 3 tight, small box card games. For those familiar with Arboretum, Zany Penguins plays sort of like a reverse Arboretum, whereas with Arboretum, you need, at the end of a very tight card game, the most of a suit in your hand to score what's in your tableau. Zany Penguins is sort of the opposite. You need the most in your tableau to score what's in your hand. So I really, really enjoy Arboretum. That's a little bit of a spoiler. Zany Penguins sort of offers a little bit of the same thing. It plays differently. Instead of drawing a card and discarding a card, which is where some of the agony in Arboretum lies, in Zany Penguins, you are giving cards to your opponents, and that's where the agony, which is something I love in tight card games. The agony is, I've got these cards. I have to give these to my opponents. I'm going to get cards from my opponents that I'll have to play. They're going to give me garbage, and I'm giving them all this great stuff. What am I going to do?
So I feel like we could make this like AI that would make like games that you would like.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
like take Zany Penguins, Arboretum, Biblios, and Peep Mots, and like eat them all and then start vomiting out like different variants of that.
I will eat that vomit.
And then your whole top 50 list would be that vomit.
I'll eat that vomit like a baby bird.
Yeah, famously thing that penguins do. So
that's right. Yeah,
appropriate.
exactly. Oh, yeah. Nice way to tie it all together, Kellen. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That is 36 Zany Penguins, new to my list.
My number 36 game is Deception Murder in Hong Kong. This has also slipped a little bit based on recent plays. I still love Deception Murder in Hong Kong, would not turn down a game of it. I think I've been exposed to the fragility of it more recently, which is to say that you sometimes have games that are just over in 5 minutes, and that sucks for everyone involved. People feel bad, and you just have to reset it and go again. And I feel like that happens more often than I would like. But I still think that some of the games I've had of this where you are the murderer and make it all the way through to the end and then reveal that you're the murderer are some of my favorite moments in games. It's also an extremely accessible game that has a theme that is just quite easy to explain to people. It normally takes one game of it to get going, but then after that, everyone's on board.
Those moments where you're the murderer and you high five your accomplices when you're according to you a couple episodes ago, is when you're most jerky.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the most obnoxious. So I'm like, we did it.
When you dare to high five your
exactly.
teammate upon winning a game.
Yeah. That's me at my most obnoxious.
As soon as the game ends, he goes, ah! No, I feel like you're doing a little disservice there. Have you played where you just increase the amount of items and means cards to prevent, the more experienced a group is, the game literally tells you to just add another row.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Yeah.
I think that would help because I'm with Neilan. That's my biggest problem with it. Is I feel like a lot of times it's like it's down to 2 people or 3 people really early on. But that's great. That's a right.
I do think that does highlight its biggest weakness, which is like the fiddliness of like having an array of 1 million cards.
Right.
But Deception is a great game.
It is. That is my number 36 favorite game of all time, in fact.
My 36th favorite game of all time is new to my list, and I think it was an oversight from last year because there's no reason for it not to be on the list. This is a Dudes on a Map game. This is one of Christina the Blue Tank's favorite games. And anecdotally, I now have a copy of this game where one of the factions is painted because I've given up on painting. And luckily, it's the red faction that's painted. So when I play Blood Rage, I will have a painted set of minis and no one else will. Blood Rage is a really, really tight game of drafting cards. And I love games where each decision you make makes you feel bad about the other decisions you could have made. And so in Blood Rage, everyone's faction starts completely the same. But by the end of the game, you've got special powers. Something about the trade-off between, do I want to get points? Do I want to do something on the board? Or do I want to upgrade my civilization is the funniest decision to me because it's just like, I don't know what the anecdote is or the movie, would probably be how I normally do this, but it's like someone getting ready to go to battle. You know what I mean? And like they've taken so long and they've trained but then they arrive to the battle and it's over and it's like years late. It's like in the third round of Blood Rage, it's like, well, I really need to fight, but I really want that like sorcerer's like I need that armor. Like I'm gonna need that. Yeah. Like I better take that. And like my idea is just to build up and to keep building up, and the game does force you to make those difficult decisions. It is a very pure drafting and Dudes on a Map game. This is frequently talked about with Kemet, with Inish, with all of these classic games, and it deserves a place in your board game collection. Blood Rage.
My number 35 game moved up 1 spot on the list. This is one of the older games and one of the mass-produced games. This is A Question of Scruples, or just Scruples. I think this will be one of my most controversial games listed, as I think it was last year, because it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. If you're not familiar, what you're doing in Scruples is basically, there's a scoring method, but you're going to throw it out 2 minutes into playing it, because what you're basically doing is asking your friends a series of moral quandaries and marveling at how depraved they can be. What I love about Scruples, and the questions aren't really gotcha questions. It's not like a sort of Cards Against Humanity-esque feeling about it, but it does ask the question that, if you were going to be negotiating a raise next week and you walked by your boss's office and saw their computer was up and that information was potentially available, would you walk in there and see it? Those type of questions. And I think this is a game that shines when you play it with people you're comfortable with. In fact, you should really only play it with people you are very comfortable with, because otherwise it leads to awkward moments, to say the least. But I think if you do play with people you're comfortable with, it's just such a great conversation starter, and it really gets you to like see how your friends think, and also can make you honestly like think about things in a different way. Maybe like if you think that your friend would never do this or that, and it turns out they would, and they have an argument behind it, either you're gonna have a chance to have a nice like feisty argument with them about it, or maybe they change your mind about something like your worldview. I know that's being a little grandiose, but it's a board game that could possibly allow that. And you're not going to get that in a game of, Blue Lagoon. I mean, a game I love, but you're not going to get those kind of like personal insights and conversations.
Can I surmise Summarize?
Yes. Summarize.
Is some eyes just a shorter version of
Some eyes
summarize?
are like 2 eyes or 3 eyes.
Well, but isn't some eyes the same as summarize, but in a summarized version?
Oh, look at that.
I don't know.
Well, you say math, so...
Yeah, so we'll disregard.
What you're saying is that the quote on the box should be from Mark Posada. Like,
Already love it.
if no one likes you and you have no friends, don't buy this game.
Yeah, perfect. Print it.
Done.
Print it.
Yeah, the people tryharding you about a game like this is seriously because they have no friends, right?
I will not. The views
You're not
of
taking
Kellen
the bait?
Allen are those of his own. They do not reflect mine nor Board Game Barrage's.
I struggled with both this and another one of your favorites, True Colors. I think that True Colors maybe should have made my list. I think it's so good. But they're sort of, in a way, flavors of the same thing, which is like a good way to get you all talking with each other, which is the reason I play board games.
Yeah, as you were talking about Scruples, True Colors, which would be my preferred version of these games, I was thinking to myself, maybe that does deserve a place on my list, because there is something special about the uncomfortability that grows a friendship, which I think this is what this game is in 100%. A box.
So that's my number 35 game, Scruples.
My number 35 best game of all time was, again, already mentioned by Mark. This is a new game for the list and a new game for 2019. It is Pipeline double crossover.
Same episode, double crossover.
That's the thing. Pipeline is one of the most pleasant surprises of this year for me. I think there was a good chance I was going to like it if you say Euro game with a tile laying component, but I was still very pleased because it is a heavy game. I think Lacerda-like, as Mark mentioned, is the right touch point, but I want to say it's better than that.
I don't think that's crazy. I think I think this is like the best of Lacerda. Like, this is
what does Lacerda like mean?
As in, it has a complexity to it.
A lot of gear, like a lot of actions and gears connecting with each other, like economic generally, but like this affects that. There's a lot of like moving parts that all intertwine.
Yeah, and it's a hard game to take in all at once, but I think it flows much better than most Lacerda.
Yeah,
you
I agree.
Once you've heard the rules and once you've played a couple of turns, you're not wrestling with it anymore. It's all laid out. You still have all the options, but it just comes together. There's a great curve to the game as you get machinery, and you can suddenly start to execute your pipes every turn at a cost. So you have to be making more than you're spending on your machines. Laying out your pipe network is a fun little puzzle, and there is a flux to the market based on how easy it is for different players to produce different types of oil. It's a really, really smart game. I played one of the most brutal first games of this and still came away loving it. And then every subsequent play has just increased my love for Pipeline, a game I want to play much more of in 2020.
My 35th best game of all time that is certainly better than Pipeline is Sixes. Sixes is essentially a small gamery upgrade to Scattergories, where you do a series of rounds where you are looking to write things down that no one else writes down, looking to write things down that everyone else writes down, and then a lightning round with 6 categories all at once. There's something just very hilarious about a card coming out that says types of soft drinks, and you're trying to get the most common soft drinks, and then it's people arguing about whether, you're the only one who said Mountain Dew. And then they're like, well, what about Coke and Pepsi and Sprite and 7-Up and, root beer? Those are all more common than Mountain Dew. But in your mind, Mountain Dew is number one. and these idiots didn't write down Mountain Dew. And why the hell did no one write down Mountain Dew?
Why did no one do the do?
Exactly. Fueled by Mountain Dew. And then after you're done arguing about that, then you go to the even more argumentative part of the game, which is where you have to define why your unique answer is unique and qualifies. So this could be things found in a purse. And then someone puts gun. And everyone's like, well, yeah, people probably put a gun in a purse, but is it a thing found in a purse? And everyone...
If nobody has a gun in their purse right now, that answer does not qualify.
And you only score if it's unique, right? And then someone will put penny and nickel, and you're like, and then someone else put change, and then you have to argue about whether those both count or whether they don't count. The way that our group has evolved, and actually has essentially added another element to the game, is voting. And so that is voting on whether or not an answer counts or doesn't count. And there's a huge meta commentary going on where if you vote for me now, I will help you later, which turns this party game up to 11 for our groups. It never goes over poorly. We always have fun playing sixes.
This has led to some of the biggest arguments we've had. Our Spiders Bugs was like half an hour of conversation.
Air in an airport.
Air in an
It's
airport
Air
is
in an
a
airport.
famous
That's-
example. Oh my God.
But it's great.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
great. It is great.
It is great.
My number 34 game is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar, which has moved up 7 spots on my list. I got a chance to play it a couple months ago. Just love the timing aspect of this. This is sort of along the lines of Blue Lagoon, a game where timing and tempo sort of matter. Anybody who's heard of this game knows the big gimmick, which is done very well, which is the interlocking gears. You place workers on them, and depending on how long you're willing to leave them on, your rewards grow and grow. So there's an aspect of, will I let my workers stay on there to get a bigger reward? But you have to take tempo and timing into consideration. It's big on timing, which is a great worker placement game that feels very fresh in the genre. That is Tzolk'in, my number 34 game.
Tzolk'in's fantastic. I can't think of a game that more explicitly rewards like specifically thinking ahead. Like every placement of anything you do in that game has to be thought ahead to the next turn, where it's going to pay off, or the 2 turns after that, and so on.
Live in the now. Why think about the future?
It's also a game where the central gimmick feels necessary.
Yes.
Like I don't see how Tzolk'in works without the gears.
Painted gears.
Painted
They must
gears,
be
ideally.
painted, but not by me. Whatever you do,
Someone else.
do not let me paint your miniatures.
My number 34 game of all time is one of the older Euros that sort of actually held its spot despite games entering above it. It is Agricola. This is buoyed by his recent plays of it, and a game that, even though it has that older style of artwork, has wooden pieces, especially if you're playing this with the animeeples.
Just a second. I'm going to stop you right now because we have something even more special than a same episode crossover. A same number crossover. Double
very
crossover.
nice. The number
Agricola, high
34.
five. Boom. You can't have what we have.
This game looks great on the table because of all the little fences, all your little wooden sheep, and etc. It's a game that is punishing. It is the quintessential sort of worker placement that Kellen loves specifically, where it is cruel to take a spot away from someone else. It is cruel not to be able to feed your family. It is
What? Did you just say it's cool to not feed your
cruel. It is
Oh,
cruel.
I thought you said cool. I'm like, because you're saying why it's punishing. It's cool that it's no heat and your animals die.
Right. Yeah, Agricola is certainly held up. I enjoy it a lot. Kellen,
Yeah,
take it away.
Agricola was my number 50 last year, so it's moved up quite a bit. Every time I play a modern Euro game, I think, wouldn't it be grand if we were playing Agricola right now? Wouldn't it be great if these decisions mattered? Just the blockading and the I must have a backup action and a third action because these spots are going to get taken. The game is very clever in that spots that don't get taken get more valuable. And it's not always just like, oh, put $1 on it. They get more of the resources that you need. And eventually you even make a tactical decision. You say, well, I don't really need wood, but there's like 15 of them there. And so I could do something with that, right? And if I don't do something with that, someone else is going to do something with that. It stands in such a stark contrast to other games that Neilan will disagree. He's been nodding. If you can't see this, he's been nodding and he's about to stop nodding. Because games like A Feast for Odin just kill the joy of what it means to be a worker placement game. And for me, Agricola deserves to be played still. And I've gotten some criticism or some heat for saying like, oh, Architects of the West Kingdom is just, it's a different type of worker placement. And just because you don't like that type of worker placement, you can't critique it for not being what you want out of a worker placement game. What I will say is that I am always looking for meaningful decisions, and when you do something or when another player does something, that has lasting impact on the game, and I feel like Agricola does a much better job of that than a game like A Feast for Odin.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to A Feast for Odin later in my list. I think you can have both, but yeah, I think Agricola certainly does scratch an itch that a lot of more recent worker placement games do not. That is certainly true.
A good game.
So I guess that covers both of your 34. So I'll get to my 33. This is down 9 spots from before, but I still enjoy it quite a bit. This is The Great Zimbabwe from Splotter. It's unique in that it is a logistics game, and you need to work with your opponents to piggyback off of the resources that they're making available, which is interesting in and of itself. But my favorite part of Great Zimbabwe is the moving victory point total. So this is a race to a number of victory points, but that number shifts for each player depending on the powers that they acquire during the game. So there are powers that are made available to you throughout the game that vary greatly. Some that give you an incremental change to your play, and some that affect the game in much stronger ways. But the trade-off in getting one of the lesser powers to getting one of the stronger powers is that the stronger powers will now shift your victory point total higher, so that instead of going for 30 points for the win, now you need to score, say, 40 points. So I just found that really very interesting, because there's the obvious trade-off of, am I going to get a strong power at the cost of making my end goal harder to reach? But you can also combo that power with other powers that you can get throughout the game. So there's the question of, yes, this power is going to cost me a lot, but if I get this one and I get this other one that isn't going to cost me so much, they synergize really well when taken into account where I am in the game in the board state, that I can really make these two work well for where I'm at and what I'm trying to do. And so it's worth the victory point bump. But you can also play it that you're not going to lean heavily into these powers. You're just going to try to get to that lower victory point total quicker. And I just think that's such an interesting mechanism. It's also got a unique bidding mechanic where your bids are redistributed throughout to your opponent. So there is a push your luck element to how long you want to stay in a bid, because every bid that you make just strengthens your opponents. It just feels like a lot of spotter games do, and it is punishing a lot of spotter games. There's not much of a catch-up mechanism, but it just feels really fresh and really different, and I just really enjoy The Great Zimbabwe.
Is it better than Founders of Gloomhaven? Probably.
It is better than Founders of Gloomhaven, but it shares some spirit with it.
Yeah, no,
not too much. I
actually don't think they're that similar. The Great Zimbabwe is a game I would love to revisit. I had a very, very bad first game of it.
Talking back to your Deception Murder Hong Kong, where you thought you were...
this was my lowest.
Yeah, you were dragging everybody down with how you were acting at Great Zimbabwe, when I think nobody there would have said anything negative about how you were playing.
I guess what we've just learned is I'm just the most gracious player. Even
Perhaps, who could say?
You're the most pleasant player to be around. The most kind player to be around.
Keep going.
It's kind of like having like a houseplant playing with you.
Thank you.
Like a non-entity.
Okay, we're done.
That is my number 33, down 9 spots, The Great Zimbabwe.
My number 33, best game of all time, is another game that sort of held its spot more or less. This is Orléans.
Orléans, Mark Bigney. Orléans.
Beautiful. This is it's a game that I've been itching to buy at various points. I don't have this in my collection, but I love every time I've played it. It's a game that I want to show to people because the combination of being a Euro game with the bag building element is something that in some ways shouldn't work. Like relying on sort of drawing effectively from your bag in order to power your engine feels like that could be quite unsatisfying, but for whatever reason, I've always enjoyed my games of Orléans. You're requiring people to go into the bag, and at the start of every round, you draw a certain number of them, and that will determine what actions you can do. The expansions I've played of this also make this quite different and quite interesting. There's an expansion that makes it cooperative, which I haven't even tried yet. I love Orléans. It is a game that looks good. It sort of does that aesthetic of the sort of slightly more modern tinge to the old Euro style of design with like kind of more cartoony stylization to it. Orléans is great.
How does the bag feel in your hands?
Substantially better than in No Swap, No Pay.
My number 33 best game of all time might be the highest game from the only true and living doctor on my list, Dr. Rainer Knizia. This is the doctor taking us on a trip to India for Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is a game that, despite having a decently weird game of this year, has actually moved up my list just a couple of spots. Taj Mahal it's a series of like poker hands, essentially, where you are going in and playing a card with elephants on it, and then Mark will try to one-up you on the elephants, and then Neilan will decide that he's probably not going to fight in the elephant game. But when you retreat and leave, as long as you have the most symbols of a type, you get the bonus, you get the benefit of that. So it's this very expensive game of poker where you are sort of bluffing, because sometimes you don't have the hand to do the thing you want to do, but you're trying to just convince everyone else not to do it. I really like how agonizing that feels. I really like how punishing it can be, and how there's no second place reward for this thing. You can just get got if you engage in the wrong hand of Taj Mahal. This is all done with a sort of connecting routes along a board, and there are multiple paths to victory and scoring points. And at the end of the day, you're done with this game in well under 2 hours, and you feel like you've played something substantial. Taj Mahal is a great game.
I enjoy Taj Mahal. It's one of my lesser Knizias. For some reason, I love everything about it. I love how it's built. It's just never connected all the way for me. But it's great. I would play it anytime. Maybe it's just my own inability to fully grok it that hurts it for me. But it's great. It's definitely great.
It's actually probably my favorite Knizia game. I like it a whole lot. I've described it as a series of auctions, which doesn't really accurately describe how the game feels, but is more or less like there are multiple bids, and you know what they all are at the start of the game. So you can sort of say, okay, I'm going to be saving these cards for this bid that's coming up later in the game. Or all the way up to the 12th bid, you might be banking on exactly the right thing you need and sort of building your hand towards that. It's really smart. It's mixing and matching currencies for the right time.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
I think in a way for me, when someone got it out, when Dean got it out to play it for the first time, I'm rolling my eyes at what I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking it's going to be like, okay, there's going to be an auction, and then the winner gets 4 points.
Yeah.
Second place gets 3 points. Third place gets 2. And, when you're rolling your eyes at, you kind of can almost finish the rule book for a game when you're a quarter of the way through it. And it just has so many moments where I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, right.
Wait a minute, what? That's actually that mean? Wait, no, I get something.
For sure.
And you just don't. And so that element of just being like, this is this game, and people almost get uncomfortable with it. Some of the people we were playing with this year, it's sort of just it doesn't connect, and you're sitting there going why am I doing so bad?
Yeah.
And Taj Mahal, it's great. Buy it.
Yeah, the new edition is beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. Buy. As a callback to ourself and not to NSYNC.
Speaking of new editions, my number 32 game has dropped 6 spots, but it may rebound now that I have the new deluxe edition just arrived. This is Age of Steam. Age of Steam is a train game. There will be more train games on my list, but this is the first train game on my list. But Age of Steam is not like the 18XX series of games, whereas 18XX is a game of sort of grand sweeping moves that turn your game around and turn the game around. Age of Steam is more about efficiency. It's more about winning small victories and maximizing things as much as possible. You're only selling your own shares to raise money, but you're not acquiring your own or other players' shares. So it's quite different than 18XX games, but it is very tight, very cutthroat when you're battling somebody for a resource or for a spot on the map, and you're trying to lay your tracks down to get somewhere, and suddenly someone has an opportunity to cut you off. It also is buoyed by the fact that there are hundreds of different maps for the game that allow you to play anywhere from the USA, like you could play the Midwest, or you could play a version of it where you are ferrying souls to hell, or I think it's from heaven to hell. I can't remember, or hell to heaven. I guess not from heaven to hell, because that would be really messed up. But Age of Steam is just a great route building game that rewards knife-edged efficiency, and it's just great. I love the fact that it has so many different maps and plays differently through those maps. So my number 32 game of all time is Age of Steam. The deluxe edition just come out, so hopefully I can get these guys to give it a whirl.
My number 32 best game of all time was previously my number 50 last year. This has been the biggest jump of any game on my list, and is going to make at least one person at the table very angry. It is Werewords. Werewords, I think, was new to my list last year because I only played it a handful of times, but I think 2019, showed me how versatile and sort of how accessible Werewords is. It is now the first game I will show people who are interested in the idea of a socially deduction type game. It's a game that doesn't always go over well on the first play, but again, once everyone gets it, they get it. I have had such huge success teaching this to non-gamers, more so than I think any other game on my list, because it has the shell of 20 questions, which is a game that everyone knows, but then it just layers on this social deduction. Oh my God, I didn't know that games could be this, right. Just a pure party game without many rules, without a lot of components. And everyone loves that first moment where they get away with being the werewolf, or they get to sort of find out who the werewolf was. It's just a game that is so good at introducing some of these more interesting mechanics that I love about board games to people that might not have even known that they existed. Werewords is a fantastic game that I would highly recommend to if you're trying to bring in a big group of non-gamers.
I just love how novel and fresh it is. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly. It's never
You
been done
triggering
before.
bastard.
But on that note, I will say, Insider versus Werewords has been a point of contention. I do like the layers that Werewords adds onto the formula. I wasn't sure I did, maybe why it was lower down my list last year, but having played it more, I do like the twists that the time
that we played it more this year, it went horrifically wrong with having all the extra stuff on it, and we were looking at each other the entire game.
That might just be the people we were playing with, perhaps.
It's actually hubris.
I can't wait to hear this.
It's like Apple versus PC. A real nerd wants to say, I want PC because it has all the options. I can do whatever I want. Like, I hate Apple because it's a walled garden, but really they'd be in Linux if they had any sense, but anyway, that's a digression. And you give a player all the options, and frequently people will overestimate their own ability to parse what those options are. So this is my same criticism with One Night Ultimate Werewolf. One Night Ultimate Werewolf is an amazing game. It's a bad game if you put all the stuff in it. And it's the same in Werewords. If you inject all of it into it, it's bad. So I do think it's a element of pride, which is like, all the options exist, so I will use all of them, and that will make the game better. And it's overestimating your own ability, where a game like Insider says, no, the core of the experience is this, and that's the best part.
I think that's a good point, but I typically don't love playing with Werewords with a bunch of the extra rolls. Like, the base game of Werewords, not the sort of the deluxe version, just has, I think, like, the mayor, the werewolves, the seer, and that's kind of the combination I'd recommend. It's like one or two twists above Insider that I think is just right. I certainly wouldn't throw everything at a game of it.
And then if you don't bite into that argument, there's a secondary argument, which is they stole the game. Great.
That is Werewords at number 32.
My number 32 best game of all time is Imperial 2030. Imperial 2030, I think, is the perfect combination of 18xx style stock market craziness, but it's combined with a type of game that I prefer to, like, economic track laying, which is like a dudes on a map war game. So this is a game where you are taking control of countries and their troops, but not to help the country or the troops, but to make money. And so you might have multiple countries, and you might acquire a country only to take that country and, like,
crater it, just like use it.
Literally use it to just attack Neilan's other country with no thought of using it for good or helping the people that are there. And even the people in your main country, it's not like a game of Risk where you're just building up this force. It's what's the tipping point where it's actually more about making money for yourself than it is reinvesting it back into that country.
Right.
And so there's a tipping point where you're kind of like, yeah, I don't need this to get bigger. I just need to take money.
Right. I remember our game of it. I forget who it was. I think I had been controlling China, and I abandoned it, or somebody took it over, and somebody said, what, I think it might have been Christina, said, like, what did you leave me with? Like, what did you do to China?
Like, what the hell? Like, yeah, you acquire the country, and then you look at the map and look at the resources, and you're like, oh, damn.
Yeah,
like,
right.
This is not a good situation.
Yeah.
Imperial 2030 is very player-driven and has the emergent narratives and types of things that I look for in a game with hyper-interactivity. I have not played the OG Imperial, so this is the sort of sci-fi, my futuristic version of Imperial, but I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's one that we have not played enough, and I imagine we would only grow to like it more on subsequent plays.
I absolutely agree with that. It's of the games that we sort of played as a group together, it's one of the ones I most want to return to, and I would be so down to it.
My number 31 game of all time dropped 9 spots, primarily because Kellen made me sad about it. This is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I was so excited to play with my friend Kellen, and then he played it by himself and came back and said, what were you thinking?
Well, I played it with others,
right?
Not by myself. That's because
that's a Neilan thing. I forgot. I get you guys confused a lot.
Yeah, got it.
So yes, this is a game that I thought I liked a lot. I think I still do, but I'm tempering it now. It's a Ameritrash Cthulhu style game where you are mostly playing co-op. There is a potential semi-co-op nature to the game where your character can be injured in two ways, either physically, in which point if they die, you're out, or they can take mental damage and potentially go insane and take on a new insanity trait, which can be something benign, or it can be now the only way you win is to kill one of your compatriots. So it also has one of its biggest selling points, and one of the things I like most about it is the app integration is fantastic. I love how seamlessly it handles the bookkeeping. Every game I've had of it has been super fun, very rollicking. A couple of them have led to some of the greatest moments in board games I've ever had. So I think I like this game a lot, but Kellen seems to tell me otherwise. So we'll see. Once we all get a game of it together, we'll see if this rebounds next year or if Kellen has started its descent into oblivion for me.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it has Mr. Cthulhu in it.
Right.
And so
you're a big fan.
That's a huge plus
Yeah.
for me. I love everything that Mr. Cthulhu stands for. It's a series of roll dice and see what happens. I think you've been
You're way more deterministic. You just want numbers. You're a number crunching guy. Right?
Yeah, the less dice, if I don't like dice in my games. You know what I mean? I'm a try-hard edgelord. If there's dice in a game, I just know I won't like it.
Right.
Mark.
I'm looking at your tattoo now with a pair of dice with a big no sign through them, and so I know.
Yeah, it's a Pikachu holding those dice.
That is my number 31 game, Mansions of Madness, 2nd edition.
My number 31 game of all time is Gaia Project. This is a version of Terra Mystica that I like a lot. Terra Mystica, for whatever reason, was a game that I thought I would like, but for whatever reason didn't speak to me. It has some weird quirks to the way that the systems work. Gaia Project sort of smooths out some of those edges. It adds a little bit of complexity, but also sort of refines parts of Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica had these sort of cult tracks that you're moving up. Gaia Project replaces them with tech tracks, and every spot along the tech track corresponds to new betterance of your abilities. It makes more sense. It does remove some of the spatial competition from Terra Mystica, which is a move that I think I preferred about Terra Mystica, but I think it makes Gaia Project a little bit more friendly, a little bit cleaner, and doesn't allow players to get shut out early game. It was quite a long, heavy game. Gaia Project also has a sci-fi space theme. I don't love the garish, colorful look of Gaia Project compared to Terra Mystica, but I still think that this is a fantastic game, one of my favorite heavy games, and the asymmetric player powers are just great. Like, you can come to Gaia Project any number of times, play a different faction, and have a completely different experience.
And they're all balanced, remember, guys.
Absolutely.
As long as you do an auction at the beginning in point. Oh boy, won't that be fun?
That is Gaia Project at number 31.
A game that everyone will agree is better than Gaia Project is my 31st best game of all time. This is also Friedman Freese's best game, Fuji Flush. Fuji Flush is a small box card game that is probably the closest thing that I would say to a family that said, well, we want to play Uno. I would say, no, you don't. You want to play Fuji Flush. It's that level of complexity. And other people would say, well, Kellen, why don't you tell them to play Chudyak's Red 7, another fantastic sort of Uno style game? And I'd say, stop being a tryhard. Not every game needs to have all these rules in it. Fuji Flush is a game about making alliances while you play your cards down. You play a 2, and then you look at Mark and you say, Mark, we're going to win if you play a 2.
Train.
2, chew. 2, chew. 2, chew. And then Neilan has a choice. Neilan has a choice, and that choice is to join the train, to join the choo-choo, or to get us all. And he usually chooses the choice. So our 2s become 4s collectively, and all we're trying to do is to get around one round. And Neilan has a choice. He can either join the 2 train, strengthen the 2 train, or use one of his really expensive cards to get us all out right then. And all you're trying to do is get rid of your 5 cards. This game works best at player counts higher than 4 in a raucous party-style game. There is the elation, the highs and the lows of winning a game of Fuji Flush. This is lower on my list than it was last year. I do get it. It is not the best designed game, and you can get to a place where you have 1 card left and it's a 2, and you're basically just desperately hoping there's a way for you to get to the end, and you probably can't win. But still, the moments that this small card game bring make it my 31st favorite game of all time. That is Fuji Flush.
So that's going to do it for our lists, and that's going to do it for the podcast. So what do you think about our 40 to 31? Let us know at either boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, boardgamebarrage.com/guild, or write us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Join us next week when we get to 30 to 21 and cross that halfway point. As always, a big thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? And until then, hope you guys are enjoying your holidays. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
My number 38 best game of all time is Crokinole. Crokinole is the quintessential dexterity game.